If you feel like you are caught on the hot girl hamster wheel with all your beauty to-dos and pampering, you are going to want to listen up. Look, I get it. We all see signs that we're aging, and perhaps we feel like our beauty is slipping away, or we don't like what we see when we look in the mirror. I'm 44 years old. I'm not immune to this. I feel that way too sometimes. But here's the problem. We keep throwing things on our beauty to-do list, from facials to Botox to fillers to lasers to dry brushing to threading to waxing to all these crazy things. And we just feel like we're spinning our wheels. And all of that spending and consuming is making us miss out on other things in our life. And it's stressing us out. And you know that stress affects your skin. If you feel like your financials are totally out of whack because of this hot girl hamster wheel and you just don't know how to get off, this episode is for you. I'm Dr. Mina, host of the Skin Real podcast. I'm so glad you tuned in. This week, I am joined by my guest, Dr. Bonnie Koo, and we are going to be talking about the emotional and financial cost of keeping up with beauty standards, especially as women in midlife. And actually understanding our finances can bring freedom, it can bring peace of mind and a new lease on life. And Bonnie is a self-proclaimed overspender. So it's not all about just being restrictive to cutting all the fun things out in life. But when you understand your finances and you understand money, it allows you to have this freedom to spend and do the things that really bring you joy. Bonnie is a dermatologist turned financial coach. She is creator of Wealthy Mom MD, which is a podcast and coaching program for high achieving professional women. And she's going to show us on this episode how we've all been thinking about money the wrong way and how we can finally change that narrative to have peace of mind, and why she views financial literacy as a form of self-care. Let's get into it. Bonnie, I'm so excited to have you on. You are a dermatologist by training, but now you've really pivoted into the financial world. And I just think that's super cool. And I would just love to know how that transition happened for you.
It was kind of by accident. I was just learning about finances myself, and I was sharing it with other female physicians, and then it was kind of clear this was a huge gap in I mean, honestly, for anyone, not just female physicians. Just started getting asked to speak. I started a blog, and then I worked with a coach myself, and then I created a course, and that's the rest is history.
Yeah, amazing. Does your background in dermatology and skin health, do you ever see that coming into the picture with your financial coaching and speaking at all?
Well, I specifically work with female physicians. So I think that shared history is so helpful, not just for me, but for them too. I think we feel more comfortable, more safe when we're in a group of female physicians, especially when you're talking about money. It's not a topic people are used to talking about or might not be comfortable. And so, there's just this immediate comfort. I'm assuming it's the same way for you.
Yeah, I think just having shared experiences, right? That for so long, our identity is being doctors, right? Just like people listening, even if you're not a doctor, whatever, it tends to be whatever your career is, right? That can be your identity. But your identity, I also think, as moms, we're recording, it's about to be Mother's Day, right? That is a huge identity for women. And I think that is wonderful and beautiful. But then at other times, it makes us feel like we have to be martyrs as well. It can be challenges as well. But yeah, I also think that as women, we don't talk about money enough at all, right? And not just whether you're a doctor, whatever professional or not, it feels like we just do not get a lot of education on this.
Now that I have a son, I'm just realizing, like, we don't get a lot of education on really important things. Money's just one of them. It's like, why are they not learning this in school?
I've seen those funny posts where it's like, I'm sure glad I learned how to play the recorder when recorder season comes along, right? But no one ever teaches us how to do taxes.
Yeah, or money, or just like manage emotions, how to have great relationships, all like just really important things for life in addition to knowledge, right?
We're similar ages, and I find that I'm seeing changes in myself, at my friends. I'm getting a lot of patients around sort of midlife, seeing changes, feeling a little discouraged, frustrated. And I call it the hot girl hamster wheel that we get on. You can get on this in a lot of different ways, but for skincare, I feel like, it starts out like, oh, I'm just going to highlight my hair. Okay, now I'm like full on coloring my hair every month. Now I'm doing threading and Botox. Oh, now I got to do this. Now I got to do that. And we keep adding to our like self preservation because we see these changes happening and we're petrified about what will happen if we stop or we don't look the exact same that we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I just find that it's exhausting and it's super, super expensive and it's not really sustainable. But do you find that a lot of women are spending on a lot of things, especially like personal care, beauty, things like that?
I work with so many different women. Like some people are really into it. I find that in general, a lot of female physicians don't prioritize themselves. So it really just depends. I just have a side comment. Again, I've been experiencing, obviously, we're all aging, no matter how old you are, just like really unpacking. I have some additional training in just like feminist studies, I guess, to help with my coaching since I coach women. And just we're told that we get the messaging at a very young age how important our looks are and that it's like almost a measure of our self-worth. Like beauty is too highly regarded in this culture and probably many other cultures. I think there is that pressure to always look good. And then I've had to like think about this like, am I doing this just because I feel like I need to, or do I want to do it? It's probably a combination of both ultimately. But I've also found, and you know this more since you're still practicing, is like we don't age linearly, right? I definitely noticed there were like two distinct times since my 30s where I feel like the aging really accelerated. And I feel like I just had another one of those and it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I truly feel like I'm 25 on the inside. We have some like pre-meds in our office, and I feel like I'm their peer, I'm their age, and technically I could be their mother, right?
I actually don't know how old you are, but you look great.
I could be their mother in a very socially acceptable way. I do feel like things are changing so much too, because I'll look back at pictures. I'm sure you've seen like photos of our grandparents, or I just remember in high school seeing pictures of the graduating classes and looking at them thinking, that is what an 18-year-old looked like back in 1950. Like, couldn't believe it. So I do feel like 40's the new 25 or whatever. I do feel like there's this push for longevity and healthy and all that. But as a dermatologist, of course, I want people to feel good. I want them to have healthy skin. I want to feel good and look good. But it is important to walk that fine line of we do need to accept aging and things changing. Otherwise, things get weird. But I do find that we're very susceptible to all this marketing being thrown at us, telling us we need to fix this, we need to fix that. And to your point, like we're not worthy if we don't look amazing, right?
And then there's the social pressure. It really just depends who you spend time with. Like, if there are people who do that, then you feel like you should do it. And then obviously, everyone has different genetics and different history in terms of how they took care of their skin. It's funny. I know this isn't the focus of the podcast, but like recently, there's a part of my face that really bothers me. And I'm like, am I willing to do something more invasive about it? I'm sort of in this like contemplative phase, but I don't know. I have thoughts.
Yeah, you can think about it too, right? Like there's no reason to like rush out and get opinions and things like that. Are there any like financial red flags that you commonly see with women when they are spending, especially on sort of non-essential like personal care?
I mean, technically, most of it is not essential, right? But I guess, like, what with any spending is if you're spending at the cost of the financial goals you want to achieve, then that's something to examine. Because we both know there are like lower cost ways to take care of your skin. And yeah, Botox is expensive, and filler and laser, those are not inexpensive items. I don't know. If you really want them, there are ways to get them a little like cheaper. You could, I don't know, find a resident clinic. It's not like it's impossible, but I mean, obviously, I don't recommend anyone go into credit card debt over these types of things. So easy to spend money. I mean, I find myself being like, "Holy crap, did I just, like, spend $400 on XYZ?" It's like, it's insane.
Yeah, Amazon's a bad culprit for me.
I thought you weren't supposed to buy skincare from Amazon for authenticity reasons.
Not skincare. I am super, super basic with skincare. Like I use the Dove Beauty Bar soap and CeraVe and La Roche-Posay. I don't splurge. My skincare is super basic, but I will get twice a year toxin, and I am going to start doing like a once a year kind of laser. So I'm sort of selective, and that's kind of what I recommend, that save your money for the stuff you really want that's really going to be impactful, and really focus on prevention first and foremost, right? Like if you never get that sun damage to start with, you don't have to do moxie and chemical peels and all this stuff to remove it. So prevention's huge. You don't need to buy a $200 vitamin C serum. You don't. Now, if you love it and it doesn't hurt your wallet, I'm not going to tell you not to, but you certainly don't need to spend hundreds of dollars on skincare. In my view, save it for the in office procedures that can be really impactful. But yeah, no, I don't buy my skincare on Amazon. So, Bonnie, you talk about building wealth as self care. Can you go into that a little bit more? Because I think we think of self care as getting a massage, right? Or reading a book or taking a vacation, but financial wealth being self care. I'd love to hear more about that.
Taking care of your finances is like, in many ways, I think one of the highest ways to take care of yourself because money is so important. You can do more self care things. If I love going to Miraval, the all inclusive spa resort. Like, I love all that stuff that is not inexpensive, although I use points for Miraval generally. But, it's like you can do more of that. You can do more of really anything. You can have more freedom, more choices, and, your career and things like that. And so, yeah, it is one of the because it kind of allows even more self-care, right?
I agree. And then you're not stressed, right? Don't they say the number one issue in marriages or probably relationships, right, is financial, right? Like the stress of finances is huge on relationships and your life. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you have lots of debt, then it is stressful. I remember in graduating from residency or med school and then residency, I lived in expensive cities, didn't pay my interest down, and my student loans just ballooned to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I was so distraught by that. I spent the next like 7 years paying it down because I could not have that hanging over me, even though probably your advice to me would have been to make investments and do some other things. Just mentally, I needed to be debt free before I could move on with my life. You probably see that a lot with your physician coaching clients.
Yeah, actually, one of my clients did pay down her student loans aggressively in the name of not just getting out of debt, but to have more choices. And then when she was done, she realized it like didn't actually help that much. The thing with paying up debt is you have nothing to show for it except for one less payment. You don't start getting cash flow.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have to talk to Sally Mae anymore. So that was huge.
Oh, yeah, no, that's especially if the interest rate's on the higher side, for sure, but this was recently, she realized the fallacy of being student loan free. She's like, I still have to work and to make a lot of money to now invest." It's not an all or none sort of thing, but I just want people to be aware that financial freedom comes from having assets, not paying off debt, ultimately.
Talk to us a little bit more about that, because I used to think, you have a job, you work, you retire at 65. That was the model with my dad. My mom stayed home, my husband's parents. People certainly still do that, but you're never going to get financial freedom, right, by doing that.
I mean, you will at 65.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
I think that's just an outdated paradigm. Things shift every generation. So there's like two problems. One is you have to wait until, whenever you have the money that you need to live off of. And that's really based on stock market investments. But the truth is, the money continues to grow. And so you will most likely die at your peak net worth. And it's like, why did you work so long? So I think like everything's different, right? Technology, but specifically in terms of this retirement paradigm, like we're living longer. And what that means is questioning like, are we meant to have just one career? And just like dismantling someone made up that we should work 40 hours a week and that Saturday and Sunday are your weekends off. Although, with doctors, that's not always the case, right? And so a lot of the things that we just take for granted were just like made up and now they're kind of like institutionalized. And so when I talk to people and like, we're just talking about like how our days are and whatever, they're just like, oh, you must be so lucky to be able to do XYZ. The truth is, everyone has access to however they want their life to look like. It's just like understanding that it's possible.
Yeah. A lot of people don't even know that's possible, right? I do feel like COVID sort of upended everything, right? But then people started working from home. They started realizing, oh, I can do my job from home, and they don't want to go back to the office, or maybe they picked up some side hustles, right? And They want to be able to do that plus their job, and by working from home, having more flexibility, they can balance these things. And the work week too, right? Like it used to be what, 8 to 5 for a normal job, but now with phones and computers, people are doing work at all times of the day, at all hours. It's hard to know, where does the workday really end too. So I feel like we're not just working 40 hours anymore. We are always connected to work.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard a lot of companies, well, not, I shouldn't say a lot. They're kind of, testing out the 4-day work week and have generally found that employees are happier and they're actually getting more work done. There's a lot of wasted time, as we all know, for most work. I mean, for doctors, not really. Someone just decided that's how it is. Someone just decided that the way the traditional educational system is the way to learn. We're actually homeschooling my son this fall. And so I've always been a bit anti school. What I mean by that is like not like anti learning, but just anti the way the current school system is. I like to question things if you haven't noticed. And so I think with money, there's just a lot of things to question about. And it's like we're all brainwashed that this is how it is. You work and then you retire. You also have to remember, though, our parents' generation, if you work for a company, they kind of took care of your retirement. And now a lot of the responsibility is really on us.
Yeah, to save, and the life expectancy continues to go up and up and up, right? You might be living a third of your life post-retirement, right? And but maybe not in great health.
Yeah. Speaking of retirement and speaking of just like breaking norms, like even like that term retirement, I'm always like, why is that the goal? And what does that even mean? Because I think like when we think of retirement, like you just stop working and you don't do anything. I mean, people do things, but like, but even just like questioning that, it's like, I just think of, and even like the term work life balance, like I like the term work life integration more, but really just life, like what did you do for work should be fulfilling. It shouldn't feel like an obligation. Not that work is always going to be like rainbows and daisies, but I think also just like questioning that, I feel like everyone kind of just accepts and jokes about being miserable at work as if it's like this shared camaraderie. It's like, but you don't have to. Anyway, so with retirement, I just always like question that. And I don't think we're meant to have one career.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes I'm like, why did I decide mid-career a dermatologist? I like practicing dermatology. Why did I decide, hey, you know what I'm going to do is also jump into real estate and also start a podcast and do all these things? But I sort of felt like, well, I've made it to here. What's the next challenge for me? I needed another challenge to keep me growing and learning. I'd love to hear, Bonnie, some advice for a woman out there listening who feels like they don't know anything about finances, they don't understand it. What is just some like basic first steps to get started?
I just think about like, I have a course and I just think about the order of things. And so people usually want to get right into the like, okay, I need to look at my budget or look at my retirement accounts. And there's obviously that makes sense that they would want to do that. I really think the first stop is to just really examine your money mindset and beliefs. And this kind of comes back to what I talked about earlier is just like, what are the limitations we're making about what we think we can have, like in terms of the actual money we can have, but the type of life we want? Because again, money is just a facilitator, it's a tool, it's not the end all be all. So it's like whole point of money is to live to in this society, right? Because it's just based on money. So I think a lot of people want to dive right into the what should I invest in question. That's probably like everyone's first question. And it's like, oh hey, let's just zoom out a bit. Like, and even before the mindset, it's like, what do you want your life to actually look like? And a lot of us have stopped thinking about that to some degree, especially, especially when you have kids.
We're just on autopilot.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think a lot of people are like, "Wait, I wanna work part-time, I want more flex," like, so I think it takes some time to really think about that, and it's not like you have to, like, have this perfect answer, but starting to, like, really think about that, and if you have a partner, husband, whatever, like, have a conversation, if you think about, like, before you, are in a deeply committed relationship, it's all, like all you see is this amazing future for the 2 of you building this life together, and then you kinda stop doing that. You kinda stop talking about that. Again, the autopilot thing. So I just think first thing is to really think about that, and then it's like, "Okay, then what's in the way of me getting that mindset-wise?" Because everyone's gonna have one. Like, I don't know exactly who's in your audience, but I always, like, talk about the pediatricians because 'cause they're the ones who have probably the largest limiting beliefs about money in terms of their ability to make it and have it. And so, since you've been doing this kind of work, that's a limiting belief that's simply not true.
Yeah, and probably I guess for people who aren't in medicine, like pediatricians, they work so hard and they are compensated so poorly for taking care of our sick kids. And I think no matter what field you're in, right, you can have those limiting beliefs that who am I to make six figures or seven figures, whatever amount is in your head, right? Maybe you're a stay-at-home parent, right? And you aren't making an income, right? You're doing a ton of work that's super valuable and important, but you're not financially compensated for it.
So, yeah, I mean, truly, no matter where you are, there's so much you can do for your, because I think there's a lot of people who really believe it takes money to make money. Money does make money, but money is also just like created out of thin air, technically. And what I mean by that is like someone pays me money for coaching. It's not like, you know what I mean? Someone, it's like, so money truly can be created out of thin air. It's not just because you don't have money now doesn't mean you won't have it in the future, but you do have to do something.
You have to have something people are willing to pay for, right? And maybe you've never sat down and actually thought about that because again, that limiting belief that, oh, I can only make money through my company and I got passed over for the promotion. So you can see where that all just continues to spiral down in a unhelpful way.
Yeah. So again, there's so many options out there. What's that movie? It's with Will Smith where he was like really poor and really trying to like make it big, and then his wife leaves him because he keeps not making money. Have you seen that movie?
I am like the worst person to watch movies. I don't know. I don't know that movie.
It's based on a true story, but anyway, I don't know how true, the movies never really follow the thing. Like all of us are familiar with people who like came from nothing and, built an empire. So I'm not saying you have to build an empire, but when you keep telling yourself like I can't do that because of XYZ, then well, the truth is you won't do it because you won't do anything different. And it does take a lot of courage to do something new. It's not going to be, when I say it's not going to be easy, I don't mean like it's going to be super hard, but it's not going to be easy mainly because it's going to be new. It's going to be uncomfortable. And so it's kind of like a fork in the road. Like if I keep doing what I'm doing now, nothing's going to change. If you really want something different, you're going to have to do something different. I think logically we all know that, but then we're like paralyzed.
For sure. And then, the ante's upped, right? If you have children, or maybe you're the sole breadwinner, right? Like that's stressful to think to try something new, but that's where the growth happens, right? Otherwise, you're right. You're just on sort of cruise control till retirement. And maybe for some people, that's fine and they want that. But I think there's a lot of people now waking up and realizing just because this is how it's been in the past doesn't mean I have to do that.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, it's scarier for the situation that you just mentioned, single moms, breadwinner, etc. But kind of comes down to, are you willing to risk and bet on yourself? And I, acknowledge that there's going to be different challenges.
Yeah, everyone's situation's different for sure. But again, it all starts with that mindset, right? Like if you are determined, you'll find a way, you'll make it happen some way. Are there any financial things like you just cringe when you see people spending money on these things? You're just like, oh my gosh, this is a huge waste.
I don't really have much judgment about how people spend their money. What makes me cringy is less about that, but more like blanket advice being given, kind of like what we talked about earlier. That's kind of what makes me cringy. It's less about, because I'm like, you can spend your money on whatever, and then overspending is a problem mainly because it gets in the way of your financial goals. I consider myself an overspender. It is something I have to kind of constantly like monitor, so to speak, since I was, like, a girl, even though my parents didn't have a whole lot of money, but I always liked nice things. It's, unfortunate.
I feel like some people that's like their love language, right? Like gifts and having those things or surrounding themselves. I can be like pretty budget with some stuff. And then other things, I'm like, no, I want this to be nice. So I justify it. That's my math, my girl math. If I don't spend a lot on my skincare, then I can do this or that. But yeah, I think it's being aware of it too, right? And making sure you're not overspending to fill another void that you're not really addressing in your life as well.
I think what you said is really funny because there are, like, areas where I get so cheap on, and we're talking, like, a dollar difference. It's usually in the grocery store, like, "What? This is how much whatever it is," and actually, everyone talks about eggs, but, like, I do eat eggs a lot, and I love eggs, and, like, there is a difference between the different types of eggs, like, organic, pasture-raised for sure are just the best. And then I'm in the store, and I'm like, the prices are going up, obviously, but also just, like, I'm not spending $8.99 on a dozen eggs, and then I look at the other ones that are $3.99, but I'm like, "But I don't want those." It's like can feel like a big battle, and we're talking about a few dollars, but then, like, I don't know, I'll just, like, spend $1,000 on something else and not really think about it, you know? So I find it fascinating because I think all of us are like that, and we all have that one area where we're, like, so cheap on, but then, like, we'll just throw money at something else.
Oh, yeah, totally. My husband was mad that my kids rented a movie on Amazon for, like, 4.79, and he was upset because he's like, "I coulda gotten it for free." And he's like, "I'm gonna call them up and get a refund." And he was like, "I coulda given that money to a homeless person." I'm like, "You still can. You can still do that." Right. I'm like, "If you wanna waste your time for a $4, refund," right? This is something that I had sort of like mind drama on spending on some personal care for myself, including like masterminds and like personal development courses, stuff like that. And I now see it as an investment rather than an expense. Do you find especially women have hangups on this, like investing in themselves?
Yeah, so one of the ways I look at spending money is like and so in terms of like thinking of things as expenses, like everything you pay money for, there's some kind of return. It's not always monetary, but like, you pay the mortgage on your house because you want to live in a home that's a certain way, right? Because most people, don't live in a shack, right? And there are things that have a tangible return on investment. And so when it comes to personal development, it depends what it is, right? Because if you do one specifically for business, then obviously the ROI hopefully is more money in your business or making money faster in your business. I really think of them more as making money faster in your business, spending less time trying to do things by learning from, other people. But obviously there's ones where there is no specific like financial ROI. Like actually today I just signed on to work with a parent coach that's specifically for parents of ADHD kids. And so it's ADHD executive coaching. So there's no monetary return, but the return is priceless, right? So supporting him because it's an executive function role.
I need that coach's name when we're done.
I'll let you know how it goes. I just, got matched with someone. Yeah, my 7-year-old. So that's kind of how I like to look at spending. It kind of makes it a bit more interesting and tangible versus like just spending money and seeing the money leave your bank account. Because everything we spend money on, there's like the only thing I can think of where spending money on isn't like super useful is, I guess, fines. Like if you're paying like a parking ticket or something, but that's not money that you're like purposely spending, I guess you could say.
Right, but maybe if it's, habitual, maybe you need to rethink your driving or where you're parking all the time, right? And making sure to pay him on time.
So you don't have a warrant for your arrest.
Exactly, that costs money too, that wouldn't be a good to spend. This has been amazing, can you just, like, share your top 3 takeaway tips for women, kind of like, midlife women struggling with finances, like, that they could have some actionable steps?
Well, the first one is really just like letting yourself want more money. Cause I think a lot of us, you kind of touched on earlier, like a lot of us feel guilty about wanting more or even expressing that desire is like you're allowed to want what you want. And so just kind of like step into it. The second thing is it is really important to look at your spending. It's like probably everyone's least favorite subject, like the ins and outs. But when it comes to like the money that you want, it comes down to cash flow, right? Like the money you have spending for your day to day life. And so that's really what money is. And investing is all about creating cash flow so that you can live on it now and in the future. And so it is really important to look at it. I don't believe in just cutting expenses. Like, you want to optimize expenses, like at least temporarily. I think a lot of the budgeting advice is too focused on reducing expenses, but equally important is how to make more money, how to create more money. So I think it's really important to spend energy there. And a good question to ask yourself is like, how can I like the word create versus make, like, how can I create more money? Because that's, what I call a high quality question versus why does my life suck and why don't I make more money? You're only going to get negative answers with that question, right? So that's number 2. And then number 3 really is you got to learn money. Like it is like something to learn about. There's terminology, there's even just the whole like looking at your spending and stuff like that. Understanding assets, understanding the money that you do have, how money grows. So it is like a fund of knowledge. It's not particularly hard. It's just that we weren't taught it. And then we're also, socialized, especially as women, that money is hard and that's like a man's job and things like that. And so it is learnable. There's so many resources out there to learn, ranging from free to paid, obviously. Hiring a financial advisor does not mean you don't need to learn about money because ultimately no one's going to care about your money more than you.
So good. I love how you mentioned, yeah, it's not just about cutting your expenses. It's about finding new streams of income, right? And how you can make money in other ways. And again, I think with COVID, it was really glaringly clear for people when their salaries were cut, when their jobs were cut, that wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't just rely on one source of income. I mean, I think that was really eye opening for a lot of people out there. And it's exciting to see this sort of movement, especially I see it in the physician community because that's where I am about learning about money. And I think most people would think, oh, physicians don't need to learn about money, right? They have money, they don't need to worry about it. But what I think a lot of people would be shocked to know is that a lot of people, even wealthy people, are living paycheck to paycheck, which is kind of crazy. Or I should say, rich people, maybe, right? Like not truly wealthy.
Yeah. Just because you make a high income does not mean that you're taking care of your money because the truth is it just like amplifies.
The problems.
It does. It really does. Right. It's just that the numbers are bigger. So, one last thing I want to say, just because you're talking about different streams of income, is like this is a pretty easy visual concept. Is like, again, you were saying a lot of us are just like kind of we're told to get a job and you have one stream of income and then the retirement money, comes later. You put money away. And so I like to introduce the concept of like think of your money as like a table, like a wealth table, and you want to have as many legs as possible, which represents streams of income. So you can see how precarious it is if you only have one stream of income, which is your job. Meaning like if you lose your job, like hopefully you have an emergency fund, but then afterwards, like, or do you have other ways money's coming in? Even in my business, like I make money different ways. Some of it's more passive than others. I do like a lot of referral affiliate type stuff, and it does bring around 6 figures a year. I want to grow it to $1 million a year.
There's that mindset.
Yeah, so like I'm not dependent on one specific way that of my services, right? Because there might be a time when like a launch flops and it doesn't make the money that we thought we were going to make, and so things like that.
Yeah, everyone struggles with these things, right? Even Amazon in the beginning and Apple and all these companies, right? So it's important to learn and know how to pivot and all of that. Bonnie, this has been a lot of fun. I know people are going to want to learn more about you, learn about your courses and services. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so everything is Wealthy Mom MD. So that's my website and that's my Instagram handle. And then my podcast is also called Wealthy Mom MD. So super easy. Yeah, my podcast I think would be a great way to connect on Instagram.
Yeah, amazing. It's not just for doctors, right? Like any kind of like professional woman or anyone woman learning about finances, right?
Yeah, some of my coaching programs are limited to female physicians, but not everything is.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I will include all that in the show notes. And I really appreciate you being here, Bonnie. And I will see you next week.